Hi, I'm Mac McCarthy, and we're live. We broke up over his teenage kids. Notice I said his, meaning they're not hers. And breakups over their kids, meaning whoever you're dating has kids before they met you. It's an interesting topic. It actually comes up a lot. And in most cases, the short answer is you're usually not going to win. If someone has to pick their kids that they had before they met you, as much as they love you, they'll make space and time for you. But they're probably not going to let go of putting their kids first if that's what they've been doing for a long time. And really, can you blame them? Now, the issues with this is that parenting from afar, when it's someone else's kids, and even when you're, let's say you're in a marriage, or let's just say you have a full-time partner and you have kids together and you make it work somehow, but you're not married with the title, okay? You still have moments where someone says, I don't like the way you parent, and there's altercation situations about that. Now, the difference is, do they want your advice? Number two, do you have a right to say something? That's the part that gets tough, right? If they're not really your kids by blood, you just came into the picture, let alone, let's just say they're teenage kids in this particular situation. They've been with their parent for a long time. And what people don't realize is that whatever the situation is, when you walk in to that situation, you go, wow, they really baby their kids, or they really spoil their kids, or they really put their kids first. You don't really know what led up to that. That's tough. It's really tough because parenting is debatable on how you go about it, right? You'd like to think that your style is the right style. Some people say, I believe in tough love. Some people say, I'd never put my kids out on the streets. Some parents would say, I just can't do that, right? But when you're coming into a relationship and they got kids already, you got to share that love. You're not going to be number one all the time, and that's really tough. And they're not going to suddenly change their parenting style because they're in love with you. And if you had kids before and you had a certain style of parenting, a style that you thought worked by the results you had. I had a client this past year. He had a really tough breakup, and he was in his 50s. He had 3 grown kids. He had had a divorce after 20 plus years. Said the divorce was amicable. All his kids went to college, were pretty successful. And when I say successful, not necessarily rich, but out on their own, taking care of themselves, being upstanding citizens. And he got in a relationship with a woman that had 2 kids that were grown, I believe late 20s, early 30s, and they were degenerates. They lived at home, which doesn't mean you're a degenerate, but they had drug and alcohol problems. They had multiple kids she was taking care of, and she was putting out a lot of fires for them. And I believe she was a nurse, so it was in her nature to take care. And he was like, well, why don't you just let them live on their own and take care of their own problems? And she was like, I can't do that. And he just couldn't understand. And then what happened was the kids got wind of this, right? Mid-20s, early 30s, like I said. And they turned on him and told the mom, I don't want you to be with him because he's this, that, and the other. And he created a major shitstorm for him. But Mr. Sammy just said, avoid single parents. It's a huge liability. It's not your problem. I don't think it's that simple, but I know where you're coming from, Mr. Sammy. I think that there are situations that people get into these relationships and it can work. There's certainly clients of mine that I've had that are men that take on that responsibility. And I've said this many times before, and it sounds a little bit shallow, but a lot of times if you're coming into a relationship and you meet the kids and you immediately don't like them because you don't have that built-in love, there's something about the kid's behavior or nature, it's going to be really difficult for you. There's some kids that right when you meet them from the beginning, they're endearing, you just like them, right? And so you have space for them. And you got to be honest. When you're dating someone that has kids and you're not up for it, don't waste their time or your time. And that's okay. If that's Mr. Sammy's rules of dating for himself, that's up to him, right? Jersey girl Jen, how you doing? 2 N's on the Jen. It's a tough situation for a lot of people. What happens, Jen, is someone does one of these relationships, it doesn't work, so then they become, it never works for anyone in any situation. So people create generalizations based on their own experiences, and then they go, this is what happens to everyone. It doesn't. I don't think single parents should be shunned at all. And I'm not sure if that's what Mr. Sammy meant in his thing. He's saying that he avoids dating single parents because it's not your problem. And what that translates to me is that he's dated a single parent and it didn't work out and it didn't go well. And there was a story sent in, and I'm going to share it in a little while, of that kind of case. But there's certainly situations you got to know yourself. It's different when they're not your kids. And I've had other situations where people are in long-term relationships where they end up breaking up because the other person feels like because it's not their blood kid, it's not their official kid. And they try to reprimand the kid, and then they get undermined by the other parent because it's like, well, these are my kids, I'm going to parent them. That's a tough one. So it just, what I would say about it is it just makes for a situation in your relationship that you can navigate. But when you get into that relationship, what I would say is you're probably not going to change that bond or that love in spite of the fact that you want the person to parent a certain way. And in a lot of cases, you're competing for love. And I think that's, when you first start a relationship and you're hopefully in that honeymoon phase where it's rose petals and wine glasses and rose petals, everything is just outstanding. That's how a lot of good relationships should start. You shouldn't start with a storm, right? You want to hang out with that person as much as possible. Someone's got teenage kids, it's going to get in the way sometimes. And I've witnessed that too before. I've witnessed that with friends that have dated women that have kids, and they get jealous because they don't have that built-in love of the kid being their own kid. Now, I've noticed that if someone has, let's say, 1 or 2 kids and the other person has 1 or 2 kids, a la Brady Bunch style, right? Then there's a little bit more understanding of both being parents, right? And what it takes. But when you have a problem with the way someone's parenting their kids that they've been parenting since birth and you just came into the picture, it's not going to go over well usually. And whenever you want to give someone advice or your take, tread lightly, because it is an opinion. It's not a fact. And if you want to throw in there, well, all my kids turned out well, that's not going to go over well either, right? So it can be a minefield. It can be a really tough thing to navigate. in this story I'm going to get into, if you have a problem where you say this person's just getting walked over, or they parent in a fashion that you don't like, or you feel like it's just flat wrong, it's probably not going to change. So the idea of explaining that to them, because they learned how to parent from their parents, so it's not all their fault. And it's so circumstantial. It's like I've talked about this before, where someone might think upbringing, parenting. I think the world's changed, and you give me your take on this, Jen, because I believe you've got kids. The dynamics have changed with social media and the internet, and the influences outside of your parents are heavier than ever. So you can do a damn good job parenting, check all the boxes, and they can meet someone online that's manipulative. I've had clients that are in their early 20s that are in these video game groups, right? And they're so caught up in these video game groups, and I might get this wrong by saying video game groups, but I think people know what I mean. And they know people from around the world, and they're really affected by who likes them, right? There's a different dynamic going on right now. And so there's so many things, so many sensitive issues that can come up as a parent. And if you come into a relationship and you try to project what you think is right or wrong in a fashion that's overbearing, or, I know better than you do, look out. Because they're usually not going to choose you over their kids. And if they did choose you over their kids, they're going to regret it and resent you. Eventually, I've seen this also before. Eventually, they'll be resentful, and it will affect the relationship in a very, very negative way. Jersey Girl Jen says, it's not everyone, but you need to go into it with an open mind and lots of discussions for it to work. Good take, Jersey Girl Jen. I agree. All right, we only got 3 on deck, 2 likes. We'll see if we get a few more people before I get into the story. Angela, how you doing? Mr. Sammy, it's been a while. I hope you're doing well. Okay, so this story that came up. It was titled, and if you have a breakup story you want to share, go to writemac.com, send it in. I could give you my take in a live stream like this, or a YouTube video. If you want to unpack it in a live coaching session, that's available also. It's titled, We Broke Up Because of His Teenage Kids. She says, your YouTube channel is brilliant. I believe, a pretty 52-year-old widow. I have passions, a career, a good education, a lot of humor, a lot of friends. I'm cheerful, enthusiastic, and fun to be around. Well, that's an outstanding profile right there. And I respect the fact that you got a lot of good things to say about yourself. That's the first step to being a confident individual. Good for you. Someone might say, wow, you're really full of yourself. Absolutely not. I feel like, say good things about yourself. 8 months ago, I met a man that's 63 years old, father of 5 children, including 2 teenagers. So this man's a sire. Wow. It's a lot of children these days. Still at home, so including 2 teenagers still at home for whom he has full custody. His children do not like to go to their mother's house and prefer to be with him. Okay? From our first meetings, he shared with me his sorrows, the difficulties he was experiencing in ensuring that his children lacked nothing but how painful it was to always be the one to be caring for everyone. Ex-girlfriend, boss, dog. I was touched by his need he had to become a man again. So he's got an issue that he probably needs to seek therapy to unravel that. Painful it was, always be the one for caring for everyone. So that's a theme that he lives by. It's probably something he's developed from his childhood. I wanted to be the one who would spice up his life, and that's what I did for a while. Well, spicing up his life is excellent. That's good intentions. I'm happy for you. But it's not easy to erase someone that says that they're always be the one caring for everyone. That's a pretty big statement, okay? That's not something you just get rid of because you have a new girlfriend. That can be overwhelming, and like I said, if he's not seeing someone about it, it's probably going to bubble back up. And if he believes that, people that believe stuff like that, they go out of their way to help people, and then later on they resent it because they're not appreciated enough, okay? Or they feel like they make these covert contracts where I did this, this, and this for you, and you didn't do anything for me. So the idea that he does everything for everyone, which might be true, he's got to find out, why is he doing that? What is that about? Excuse me for a minute there. I had to plug this in. We had an amazing time together. I dated him for 6 months. I used to go to his place 3 times a week. During this time, I saw how much his children, although nice, made his life miserable and showed no respect for him. So this is your opinion, okay? The question would be, does he feel the same way? Okay, so is he feeling that? For me, nor the time we wanted to spend time together as a couple, made his life miserable and showed no respect for him, for me, nor the time we wanted to spend together as a couple. So first of all, I would just say that anyone that has 2 teenagers and their parents are divorced and you come into the relationship, they're not going to be very receptive to you in a lot of ways. I don't think that's going off a limb that a lot of teenagers don't like dad's new girlfriend. Okay? It's not always personal. That's just hard to accept. I also experienced how his ex-wife is being needy and his boss being abusive. So those are things that are his responsibility. And again, he might need to seek therapy or a coach like myself, hypnotherapy. But you're not going to fix that. He is such a good man, way too good. So way too good is not necessarily a good thing. That says that he's codependent. He probably doesn't have a lot of good boundaries, especially with his last 2 children, which he has educated as children kings, of which he literally is their valet. That's his choice. That's your interpretation. I'm not saying it's not true, but I wonder if he agrees. During these 6 months, his children have tried on me to use the same manipulation ploys as with him. Well, teenagers can be very manipulative. I found myself doing their chores, giving them lifts here and there, cooking, answering their questions, cheering them up, all this without any forms of thank you or recognition. Well, that's what teenage kids will do. You know, there's this big thing about narcissistic tendencies. Teenage kids have them all over the place. I once spoke up and made some demands, cleaning their mess and leave us some space as adults. Nothing changed, no support from my boyfriend. Well, if they've been doing this since birth and they've been, treating their father a certain way, you're not going to just make a demand and it's going to go over. They need consequences, but the question is dad going to change or does dad want to change? One day, having accumulated several grievances, I left his house. I left without shouting or anything. I left with dignity, but despite everything, he left me because I did not accept the behavior of his children. That's a choice. That's a form of an ultimatum. And ultimatums for adults usually don't go over well. You have your reasons. You probably could consider couples therapy if he was up for it, because you need a referee probably. But also, he's got to see what you're seeing. And if he doesn't see it in the same fashion, then you got to agree to disagree and move on. I know that's hard to hear. He and I argued a lot following our breakup. He argued that his children were teenagers and that I had to understand that it was a difficult phase to go through. Well, he would know. He has 5 children. My question would be, do you have any children, or have you had similar experiences with teenage children that you were raising? That's not a judgment of you. It's just a good question, right? From my part, I explained to him that while I'm aware that teenagers go through a difficult time, this was not a reason to establish guidelines around our couple and to impose rules in order to establish a climate of respect around the blended family. Okay? Since he has remained stuck in his opinions regarding the education of his children, and that I do not want to interfere in his educational choice, even if his choices torture him every day of his life. That's a strong word. Again, does he agree that that tortures him? He needs to seek individual help. I would ask, who is he talking to about these problems? I offered him that we see each other one day a week alone until we can realize our dream of living together when his children are gone. I mean, that's a consolation prize, right? It's like, look, we can, instead of seeing each other 3 times a week, let's just meet each, and when are the kids going to be gone? I mean, newsflash, kids don't leave the house at 18 anymore. That was the 1950s. There's a good chance if they're babied this much or spoiled this much, they're not just automatically going to go to college and not come back. So the idea that when they're gone, everything will be rose petals and wine glasses, they're going to still be around. And if they feel like you cut them off or you didn't support them, they're going to have ill feelings towards you for a long time, manipulate their father into not wanting to be with you. So that's not the answer. He refused. He maintains that is no way he sees. He maintains that this is not the way he sees the couple. He would like me to live with him and his 2 terrors, period. Well, there you go. You look at his kids as terrors. I'm sure he doesn't look at them as the same thing. Just for you to classify them that way says that you've already got them labeled. And let me tell you something. It's okay, but it's not okay to tell him that they're terrors because that's your point of view, right? Mind you, like I said, he's had 5 children, 3 other ones, so he feels like he's pretty experienced in this field. And it just doesn't feel like you're going to be able to meet him halfway. A few days ago, he went to see a psychologist. Good move. He told him that it was imperative that he takes care of himself, that he allow himself time as an individual, and that it is nonsense that he exhausts himself in satisfying the slightest whims of his children. Well, there you go. This is a good first step because people, I think your intentions are good, and I don't know the full situation. And maybe there's some truth to what you're saying, but you're not when you're in a relationship, he doesn't want advice about his kids or his mental state from you. He needs to go to a psychologist. He needs to go to a therapist. Okay? And so this is a really good first step. So he admitted I was right. He gave me a ring claiming that he was going to be making big decisions in the months to come, and he was going to put his life in order. I told him I was going to wait for him. Since that day, he has been blowing hot and cold, showing distance, especially when I would talk to him about finding ways to sometimes date while waiting to get his life in order. After a while, his behavior was driving me nuts, so I wrote to him that I was tired from this coming and going, that I had to take a huge step back in order to avoid suffering. So on December 30th, 2021, I informed him that I was going to distance myself and that I was going to block him on social media because seeing him appearing on my news feed was hurting me. I told him to give me a sign when he was ready to make a meaningful place for me in his life. I kept my phone open for him. The only way to communicate with me from now on. The next day, he wrote me by text saying, Happy New Year. I replied elegantly that I wished him a Happy New Year as well. My question is, am I right to wait for this man that I love and whose only fault is to be too nice to everyone? No, you're not in fault. You just got to realize that you're not going to change the situation. Being too nice is one thing. There's a really good book, No More Mr. Nice Guy by Dr. Robert Glover. That would be a good start for him. But he needs to seek that out on his own and realize that own problem. But parenting, I don't know, is his parenting style. I'm not sure if that's exactly so associated with everything here. And the fact that the kid's mom isn't in the picture anymore, and you don't seem to really want to parent them, or you want to parent them in a directly different fashion, you can wait, right? But I don't think the situation's going to change. I think if anything, you got to meet each other halfway on the bridge. You're not going to just get your way where you're like, oh, the psychologist told him I was right. This isn't about being right or wrong. This is actually about finding a happy medium. This is about learning to live with those kids, creating some boundaries. So that's my take. All right. Only got a few more minutes. Let's see here. I think it has to do with the parenting with social media. My son has a few gaming friends, and it's been going on for a few years. I think too many parents use the internet and social media as a babysitter now instead of spending time with their kids. Absolutely. Eduardo Martinez, thank you for your loyalty, my friend. Maybe he likes the behavior because he feels needed. Did he say that he feels they disrespect him and that he's unhappy with the situation? It didn't sound like that. Chris the Critic, how you doing? We got 4 on deck today. Bottom line is, when you have kids and you bring someone new into the relationship, everyone wants to project what they would do, how they would do things. And that's why the opposites attract, but opposites only attract when for example, if I don't like cleaning the house and I have a girlfriend or a wife that loves to clean the house, right? That's a good opposite because you're filling a gap, right? But when you don't line up on values, on raising kids, that's one of those things that's hard to overcome, right? And it's really hard to overcome when they're not your kids because you feel hesitant and you don't feel like it's your place. So you're actually secondhand advising the person. But it's always it's a difficult thing to navigate. I have seen it work many times. But if it doesn't work from the beginning, and entering when they're teenagers, I think is a bit tougher to win over teenagers compared to kids that are, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years old. It's a different ball game, right? The kids will always be there and should be first, and I wouldn't wait for him, and a ring isn't a good idea. Well, that's Jersey Jen's take on that. All right, I got to run. I got an appointment. If anyone's looking for some live Zoom coaching, go to writemac.com, WRITEMAC.com. Or if you'd like to send in your story, go to the same website. Take it easy. Mr. Curtains.